Hi, everyone. Eden here. I'm here to report to you regarding Aiden. Um, he's an eighth grade student here at Pathways Academy. Just a little brief background information before going into the assessment piece. He, like I said, he's in the eighth grade. He has an autism spectrum diagnosis. He's in room 115 here at Pathways, again being a therapeutic day school for students with autism spectrum disorders. From an academic standpoint, previous testing shows that he is at the average range in most areas, some deficits in math, but average overall. Past testing showed that he is at a post or high school level for spelling. It's a really high skill for him. Does particularly well with decoding and using syntax to determine missing words that are in a given sentence, even if he doesn't really understand the overall meaning of that particular sentence. But looking at the BAS, the benchmark assessment system, I was pretty impressed with his overall performance. He was a little bit resistant. He was only able to read the levels R and S texts. He didn't want to do level T only because he was really resistant. And I wanted to respect that moving forward, just because I haven't worked with Aiden all that much, so I wanted to respect where he was coming from. So R and S were the two texts that we used for this assessment. So for the level R text, it was the Fishing Smarts text. He scored a accuracy of 97%, and this was his independent level reading with an accuracy of 97%. Comprehension, he scored a 7 out of 9. In a fluency, he scored a 2. He had a total of 8 errors and 7 self-corrections, with a self-correction ratio of 1 to 2. And a lot of the errors that Aiden made in this reading had to deal with adding words in and omitting words from sentences, and a lot of mispronunciation too. Of some words in the text as well, such as nibbing instead of nibbling, wadding instead of wading. He even said bobbers instead of bobbers. So some mispronunciation, kind of similar to what the word should sound like, and he was able to kind of self-correct himself, knowing that he mispronounced certain words and went back and corrected those words to the correct pronunciation. From the comprehension section of the assessment for this text, he scored a 2. He was able to identify examples of equipment that fishermen would use on a fishing trip, identifying tackle, rod, and bait as key things that fishermen would need. So he was given a 2, being able to identify basic information, basic examples that fishermen would need. Looking at beyond the text, he scored a 3. He was able to explain why fishing is complicated. He was able to say that there's a lot of supplies that you need, and you need to be in the right place to find the most fish. So he did a good job, identifying the difficulties when it comes to fishing. About the text, he scored a 2. He was able to explain superstition and what the overall meaning is, and why it's a bad idea to have bananas on a boat. He stated that you could slip and fall overboard on the boat, but he wasn't able to really understand why somebody would need a coin in their sock. So he had trouble applying the superstition definition to the superstition of having a coin for good luck. So he scored a 2 on this section. Fluency, scored a 2. He read at a slower pace, but was able to recognize pauses and stoppages of the sentence. He was able to read in a 3 or 4 word group, and he did slow down when he came across larger and more difficult vocabulary. It would sound out those words. For example, he would sound out repellent, superstition, and terminal tackle. So looking at his instructional level, reading level R, level S, the Amazing Animal Adaptations text. He scored an accuracy of 95%, well, with a comprehension of 6 out of 9, which was limited for this reading, and scored a fluency of 2. He had made 11 errors and 8 self-corrections with a self-correction ratio, again, of 1 to 2. And like the first text, a lot of the errors that he made were, adding words to a sentence or omitting words out as well. And he made some mispronunciations of words as well. For example, he would pronounce camouflage as camouflage, adaptions to instead of adaptations, board instead of broad. So a lot of words that would sound similar, and he was able to kind of make self-corrections and again recognize that he mispronounced a word and would go back and self-correct himself. So looking at comprehension, he scored a 2 for this section. He was able to identify and explain the adaptation of the anteater and the adaptation of a jaguar, but he wasn't able to explain the other examples within the text. So that's why he scored a 2 in this section. Beyond the text, he scored a 3. He did a pretty good job explaining the main idea of the book. He stated animals can adapt to help them survive, where they live and keep attackers away. So he was able to identify the overall theme of the book and what the main idea was. So again, he scored a 3 on that section. Looking at about the text, he scored a 1 on this section. He had difficulty summarizing how the author helped imagine the animals as if he were there with them. So he had some difficulty kind of thinking outside the box a little bit for this section. And fluency, he scored a 2. Again, like the first text, he read at a slower pace, but was able to recognize pauses and stoppages of a sentence. And again, he read in a 3 or 4 word group, and he would slow down when he came across a longer, more difficult vocabulary. So looking at future instruction, he does have a little bit of resistance when it comes to reading out loud, but he does like to read text that's interesting to him. So he really likes to read Minecraft. He likes Star Wars, so he'll read a lot of material that's related to his interests. So one thing would be to continue reading those books, so he can have a more of a, building his self-confidence when it comes to reading. And in terms of vocabulary, he should continue writing down difficult vocabulary words as he reads and look them up in the dictionary and making personal flashcards. So this will allow him to build a more broad vocabulary, and he can reference the flashcards when he needs to. And another recommendation regarding writing, these flashcards can be a good benefit for Aiden, and can build his writing skills, because he does have a little resistance when it comes to writing as well. Being resistant, it may take some time for him to be more comfortable with the writing process, but writing the flashcards or even using graphic organizers can assist him with the process and channeling his thoughts and ideas. I think consistent check-ins will be a really good thing for Aiden going forward, just to see how he's doing, what's improved, what needs to be worked on, those sorts of things, so that way he can kind of see for himself what, where he's at when it comes to the reading process. And I think it'll be a good visual for him, and just knowing, what's working, what's not working. Chunking the reading material will also increase the comprehension, and answering questions as he reads will help him retain the information, because he does have some difficulty answering questions at the end of a longer text or a longer reading. He doesn't quite retain the information as well as he would want to. So I think asking questions as he goes throughout the reading will be a huge benefit for him, because it'll allow him to retain the information a lot more consistently, answering those questions. So those were recommendations for future instruction for Aiden. Again, I was impressed with his overall performance during this assessment, given the fact that he was a little resistant going into it, but I was impressed with his ability to proceed with it, and he handled himself really well. He was a little hesitant, but I think his overall results were pretty positive. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you so much.